The wind cuts like a knife when you're 3 days from the nearest town, and you've got everything you own stuffed into your coat pocket. Ethan Cole did the math. 10 years of hunger, cold, and back-breaking work. Finally enough cash to buy the one valley he's dreamed about. Perfect water, perfect shelter, perfect freedom. But when he rides up to claim it, the seller isn't just dying, he's desperate, and he doesn't ask for more money. He asks for something far more expensive. Marry my daughter by morning, or ride away with nothing. No court, no negotiation. One night to decide if he's buying land or chaining his life to a stranger with tired eyes and a heart full of grief. And just when they think the deal is done, another man shows up smiling like a friend and threatening to steal the water that keeps the valley alive. Stay with me, because what begins as a cold contract turns into a fight for survival and a partnership that neither of them saw coming. Lesson: sometimes the greatest home you'll ever build starts with a hard choice and the courage to stand your ground. If you want more stories that hit deep and stay with you, like this video, comment where you think Ethan should have drawn the line, share it with someone who loves powerful Western tales, and subscribe for the next story. The wind bit at him, rolling down from the mountains with the sharp smell of pine. Ethan Cole pulled his coat tight and guided his horse through the golden aspen trees. He had been riding for 3 solid days through country so empty the last town was just a saloon and a trading post. But he was not looking for towns. He was looking for land. 10 years he had worked for this. 10 years of freezing in logging camps and choking on dust during cattle drives. 10 years of saving every single dollar while eating hard bread and beans. And now he had finally saved up enough. The valley spread out before him like a picture. A clear creek cut right through the middle with cottonwood trees lining its banks. The meadows were filled with grass tall enough to hide a calf, and mountains stood guard on 3 sides, a perfect shelter from winter storms. Tucked away at the far end was a small, solid-looking house with a thin curl of smoke rising from the chimney. This was the Grant place, and it was about to be his. Ethan swung down from his horse at the fence. He took a long look at the property he planned to own. The fences were leaning and needed mending, but the layout was good. The house looked weathered, but the roof was sound. He saw a barn in the distance and a root cellar dug into the hillside. It was perfect. Far enough from anyone to be left alone, and rich enough to raise a herd of cattle. He started walking his horse toward the house. The front door opened before he got there. A woman stepped onto the porch. She looked to be in her late 20s with her dark hair in a simple braid. Her dress was old but clean and patched with care. Her face was pale, and her eyes were shadowed with a deep weariness. "Mr. Cole." Her voice was quiet but firm. "Yes, ma'am. Ethan Cole. I am here to see Silas Grant about his land." She just nodded, her face giving nothing away. "He is expecting you. Come with me." She never offered her name, and Ethan did not ask for it. He figured she was a housekeeper, or maybe some relative who had come to help the old man pass on. The message he had received was blunt. Silas Grant was selling, and his time was short. That meant the old man was dying, and Ethan knew a desperate man might sell for less than the land was worth. He felt a small pinch of guilt, but pushed it down. He had worked too hard to let feelings get in the way of his one big chance. The woman led him through a simple front room. A few pieces of furniture, a cold fireplace, and some books on a shelf. The air was thick with the smell of sickness. She stopped at a bedroom door. "He gets tired fast. Do not stay too long." Then she turned and walked away without another word. Ethan stepped inside and saw Silas Grant. The man was propped up on a stack of pillows, so thin you could see the shape of his skull beneath his skin. His hair was white and his hands looked like bones resting on the blanket. But his eyes were sharp and they locked onto Ethan with a piercing gaze. "Mr. Grant." Ethan took off his hat. "I am grateful you would see me. You are the one holding the cash." The old man's voice was a rough whisper. "That makes you worth my time. Sit down." Ethan pulled a chair near the bed. He could feel the heavy bundle of $3,000 in his coat pocket. It was every penny he had in the world. "I got your telegram," Ethan started. "You are looking to sell." I am looking to die, Silas said flatly. Selling this place is just settling my affairs. You saw the land? I rode through it. It is a fine piece of country. Best in 3 counties. The water rights are solid and the boundaries are legal. The barn needs some work, but the house is strong. It will support 200 head of cattle. Silas paused, struggling for a breath. I am asking 3,000. The price was more than fair. Ethan's heart started to pound. This was it. That is agreeable. I have the money with me right now. I figured you would. A man does not ride this far out unless he is serious. Silas looked him over for a long moment. Are you married? The question threw Ethan off. No, sir. Any family? Anyone waiting on you? No. Good. The old man shifted, a flash of pain crossing his face. Because there is a condition. A cold knot formed in Ethan's stomach. What kind of condition? You marry my daughter, or you do not get this land. The room fell silent. Ethan just stared at him, sure he had heard him wrong. I'm sorry, what did you say? My daughter, Lydia. The woman who let you in. You will marry her, or you will ride right back out of this valley with your money. Silas's eyes were like chips of steel. That is the deal. That is not a land deal. That is... Ethan could not find the right word for it. It was crazy. Why would you ask such a thing? Because I am a dying man, and she will be all alone here. This valley is too much for a woman to manage by herself. I spent 30 years building this place, fighting off droughts and thieves. I am not about to let it crumble into dust after I am gone. Lydia knows this land better than anyone, but she needs a man to help work it and protect it. A woman on her own is just a target for every lowlife looking to take what is not theirs. Ethan shot up from his chair. You are asking me to marry a complete stranger, a woman who has not even said 2 words to me. I am offering you a spread you could not afford anywhere else, and a wife who will not waste your money or complain about being isolated. Lydia is a rancher's daughter. She knows hard work. If you want this valley, you will marry her tomorrow. I have a traveling preacher on his way here now. You say the words, I sign the deed, and we all get what we need. And what about her? Ethan's voice got louder. Did you even bother to ask her if this is what she wants? She gets to keep her home. She gets a partner. And she gets my dying wish taken care of. Silas broke into a deep, rattling cough. When he stopped, there was a smear of blood on his lips. You think I like this? Using my own daughter as part of a bargain? I hate it. But my time is running out. This is the only way I see to protect her in this land. Ethan turned to the window, looking out at the valley. It was the land he had dreamed of for so long, and it was right there in front of him. This piece of land was supposed to be his future, a real home after 10 long years of drifting. He thought of the woman, Lydia, and the weary look in her eyes. He pictured himself hitched to a stranger in a marriage neither of them wanted, building a life with someone who'd likely resent him for being the price her father demanded. But then he thought of walking away, of another decade of saving and searching, hoping for land half as good. He thought of growing old in bunkhouses, always working another man's dirt, never having a place to call his own. He finally asked, she agreed to this? She understands what needs to be done. That was not the same thing, and they both knew it. Ethan leaned his head against the cool window pane. How long do I have? Until morning. The preacher gets here at 10. You are either standing there to marry her, or you are riding out. Silas's voice got a little softer. I know it is a heavy ask. But if you are the kind of man who works hard and keeps his word, this could be good for you both. The land is worth it, and Lydia is worth getting to know. Ethan found Lydia in the kitchen. She stood with her back to him, slicing bread with steady, careful hands. Your father told me his terms. I know, her voice was flat as a skillet. And you are willing to do it. She turned then, the knife still in her hand. Up close, he saw she was prettier than he first thought. But a hardness around her mouth told of too much grief for someone so young. I do not have much of a choice, do I? If I say no, he dies knowing I will lose everything he built. If I say yes, the land stays in the family, even if I have to share it with a man I do not know. That is not much of a marriage. No. She set the knife down and looked him square in the eye. "But I am not looking for romance, Mr. Cole. I am looking for survival. If you can work this land and keep it safe, that will be enough. I will handle the house. We do not have to pretend it is anything more than a deal." Her honesty was sharp as a tack. He respected her for it, even as the weight of it all settled on him. "What happens after your father is gone? The deed will have both our names. Neither one of us can sell without the other. We are tied together, for better or worse." "That is the point. My father is upstairs dying. This land is his whole life's work. I will not let it get picked apart by vultures the second he is gone. If marrying you is what it takes, then that is what I will do." Ethan watched her. She stood there in a simple, worn dress, in a kitchen that smelled of baking bread and wood smoke, offering him a partnership born from desperation. It was a crazy notion. It was his only shot. "I need to think," he said at last. "You have until morning. The preacher will be here at 10. She turned back to the counter as if he were already gone. "There is a bunkhouse out past the barn." He left, stepping out into the late afternoon sun. The mountains threw long shadows over the valley. He stood for a long time, just listening to the wind. Silas Grant was offering a future tied to a woman who saw him only as a necessary burden. It should have been easy to turn his back. But as Ethan looked out over that golden valley, he knew he was not going anywhere. Some chances only come around once in a lifetime. He spent the night in the small bunkhouse, lying awake in the dark. He thought about Lydia in the main house, likely awake too, wondering if the stranger would still be there in the morning. He thought about the deep loneliness that had been his shadow for years. He had always told himself that owning a piece of land would be enough to fill that empty space inside him. In his quietest moments, though, he had hoped to find someone to share it with. He figured he would get the land first, build something real, and then maybe find a woman who did not mind the hard work. This was not how he planned it. This was a deal made out of a dying man's fear and a daughter's fierce determination. But it was good land, the kind of land that could see a man through the rest of his days. And it came with a woman who, for all her coldness, had more grit than anyone he had ever met. A woman willing to tie her life to a stranger to protect what she loved. That kind of loyalty meant something. When the sun broke over the mountains, Ethan had made up his mind. He washed his face in the ice-cold creek and put on his only clean shirt. He walked up to the house and let himself in. Lydia was in the kitchen wearing a dark blue dress that was probably her best. Her hair was pinned up, making her look older. She did not smile when she saw him, but he saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Maybe it was relief. "You are here," she said. "I am here. The preacher has been here for an hour. He is with my father. We can do this in the front room when you are ready." Ethan just nodded. "I am ready." They stood in a heavy silence, two strangers about to bind their lives together. "I will work the land," Ethan said quietly. "I will do right by it, and I will do right by you. I am not here to take anything. I am here to help you hold on to it." For the first time, Lydia's expression softened just a little. Her expression barely changed, just a slight softening around her eyes, a little less tension in her shoulders. The preacher was a small fellow with kind eyes and hands that looked like they'd seen a lifetime of hard work. He didn't ask why they were there, getting hitched with no family or flowers. He just opened his worn-out Bible in the front room and spoke the words that would bind them. Silas Grant sat in a chair they'd carried in from his room. His breathing was a struggle, but his eyes were sharp as ever, watching everything. Ethan wondered what the old man was thinking. When the preacher asked Ethan if he'd take Lydia, he heard himself say, "I will," and his voice sounded strange in the quiet. When it was her turn, Lydia said, "I will," her voice steady and empty. They didn't have any rings. The preacher said they were married. Ethan leaned in for a kiss, but she stood stiff as a board, so he just touched his lips to her forehead. And just like that, it was done. It was. The preacher took a small payment and left with a blessing. Silas signed the deed over to Ethan and Lydia Cole. Then he looked at them both, his voice a faint whisper. "It's done. The land is safe. Y'all honor this." Ethan said, "Yes, sir," and Lydia said, "Yes, Father." They helped him back to his bed. He passed away 3 days later. After the funeral, Ethan and Lydia were truly alone. The house felt huge and empty, even with two of them in it. They moved around each other like strangers, polite, but always keeping their distance. Ethan took to the barn and the fields, rising before the sun to see to the cattle and mend the fences. The hard work felt good, familiar, but this was different. Every post he set, every acre he cleared, was his and Lydia's. The thought still felt foreign. Lydia stayed in the house and the garden, and meals appeared on the table at the exact same time every day. She kept the place spotless with a quiet efficiency. They ate without a word passing between them. At night, she took her old bedroom, and Ethan took the small spare room out back. He didn't mind the cot, he'd slept in worse places. But lying there in the dark, he could hear her moving in the next room, and the strangeness of it all would hit him again. He was a married man with a wife down the hall, and he'd never felt more alone in his life. Their first real talk was about the cattle. Lydia knew everything about her father's operation, down to the last detail. She answered his questions straight, giving him only the facts he needed. "Your daddy built something real good here," Ethan said, trying to break the silence. "He loved this land," she said, her voice quiet. And Ethan heard what she didn't say, more than he loved me. He decided not to press the issue. The days grew shorter and the mornings colder. A frost coated the grass in silver. Ethan worked from sunup to sundown, trying to prove he was worthy of the place, that he'd hold up his end of their deal. Sometimes he'd catch Lydia watching him from the porch. He never knew what she was thinking. They were tied together by a piece of paper and a dying man's wish, living separate lives under one roof. He couldn't help but wonder if this was all there was ever going to be. He had the land he'd always dreamed of, but the silence between them made it feel hollow. The first real norther blew in that November, 6 weeks after they buried Silas. Ethan woke up to a world gone white, covered in 4 inches of snow that was still coming down hard. He stood at his window and felt that familiar winter tightness in his chest. This was the season that tested a man. He walked into the kitchen, expecting it to be empty, but Lydia was already there. She stood at the stove, a shawl around her shoulders, her hair in a single long braid. The whole room smelled like fresh coffee. "Storm's settling in," she said, not even turning around. "Could last a few days. I moved the cattle to the near pasture yesterday, so they'll be fine." Ethan looked out at the barn, barely a shadow in the swirling snow. "I still need to check on them," he said. "And I need to haul in the rest of the oats from the shed before they're buried. We'll need more firewood, too." She poured 2 cups of coffee and set one on the table for him. "I'll start baking bread. We'll need extra if we're snowed in." It was the most she'd said to him at one time since the wedding. It wasn't warm, but it was a start. They were in this together. Ethan drank his coffee while standing, then pulled on his heavy coat. "I'll be back in an hour or so. Don't you open the door for anyone." She finally glanced at him, and for a second, he saw the faintest hint of a smile. "There's nobody for 20 miles. Who would I open it for?" The work outside was brutal. The wind howled, driving snow sideways until his face was numb. He fought his way to the barn, made sure the cattle were safe, then started hauling heavy sacks of oats to the house. By the time he was carrying the last armload of firewood, he could hardly feel his own feet. He stumbled inside, kicking the snow from his boots into the wonderful heat of the kitchen. Lydia took one look at his face and pointed a finger at a chair by the stove. "Sit. You're half frozen." "I'm fine," he mumbled. "You're blue as a norther. Sit down before you fall over." There was a new authority in her voice. For the first time, she wasn't just his wife on paper. She was his partner. He sat by the fire while she ladled beef and vegetable soup from a pot on the stove. She set the bowl in front of him with a thick slice of bread. Eat. He did, and the warmth slowly spread through him. The only sounds were the howling wind, the crackling fire, and the steady thump of her hands as she kneaded dough on the counter. "Your father ever get caught in weather this bad?" Ethan asked. "Every winter. 3 years ago, we lost half the herd in an early storm. He tried to bring them down from the high pasture and nearly died. It took him 2 days to find his way home." Ethan could hear the carefully buried pain in her voice. "He was a tough man. He was a stubborn man," she said. "There is a difference." She shaped the dough and placed it in a bowl to rise. "He thought if he just worked hard enough, he could make this place safe from everything. But in the end, the land always wins." It was the most she had ever shared with him, and Ethan knew just what to say. He just listened. "We built something good out here, something worth standing up for." Lydia turned and gave me a long, hard look, the kind that sizes a man up. "Is that why you stayed? Because you think this place is worth protecting?" "I stayed because I gave my word, and because only a fool would walk away from land this fine. But yes, ma'am, it is worth protecting. Your daddy was right about that." She gave a slow nod, some of the tension leaving her face. "Well then, we agree on that much." That winter storm blew for 3 whole days, just like she said it would. Being trapped inside together was awkward at first, but we settled into a routine. I'd bundle up to see to the livestock, and she'd keep the coffee hot. We'd sit and talk about practical things. She told me the secrets of the land, where the fences needed mending after a snow, and which creek flooded first. She was trusting me with her inheritance, the knowledge her father left behind. On the second night, with the wind howling something fierce, Lydia asked me about my life before I came to the valley. 10 years of saving money does not tell me much," she said. I leaned back in my chair, the warm coffee cup in my hands. "I worked mostly logging camps up north. Did some cattle work when I could find it. Hated the mines. It was all the same story, just work until you could not work anymore, take your pay and move on. No roots, no future." "Did you have any family?" "I had a brother. He died when I was 19, caught pneumonia in a winter camp. We could not get a doctor to him in time. After that, it was just me. I figured if I was going to be alone, I might as well be alone on my own land. At least I would have something to show for all the work." Lydia was quiet for a spell. Her voice was softer when she spoke. "I am sorry about your brother. It was a long time ago, but it never really feels like it. What about you?" "Born in that bedroom right upstairs. My mother passed when I was 8. After that, it was just my father and me. He taught me everything he knew. How to read the weather, how to manage the cattle, how to shoot straight. He always said if something happened to him, I needed to be able to run this place by myself." She gave a sad smile. "Turns out he was right. He should have just trusted you to hold the land yourself. You did not need a husband forced on you." "A woman alone out here?" she said, shaking her head. "The first winter, someone would have made an offer. By the third winter, they would just take it. My father knew that. He did what he thought was necessary. That does not make it right." "No, but it makes it practical. I did not want a husband, Mr. Cole, but I wanted to lose my home even less. So here we are." Her honesty was as sharp and clear as the winter air. Most folks would have dressed it up in prettier words. Lydia just laid out the plain truth. "Here we are," I said back to her. By the time that storm finally broke, something between us had changed. The wall of silence had started to come down. December brought a deep, biting cold. The valley was frozen still under a bright blue sky. My days were filled with hard, honest work. I broke ice on the creek for the cattle and hauled hay from the barn. This was what I had always wanted, to work my own land. But the quiet was deeper than I ever expected. Some days I would catch myself talking to the cattle just to hear a voice. Lydia seemed to handle the solitude just fine. She grew up with it. But sometimes I'd see her standing at the window, looking out at the mountains, and I'd wonder what she was thinking. We had an unspoken rule not to ask those kinds of questions. It kept things simple, if a little lonely. Then, 2 weeks before Christmas, I rode into town for supplies, and that is when the trouble really started to show its face. A lone rider was coming. Ethan heard the horse cut through the cold from inside the barn. He picked up the rifle he always kept handy, a hard-learned habit, and stepped out to see the visitor. The man was big, sitting on a horse to match, wearing a fine coat that cost more than all of Ethan's clothes combined. He looked over the small ranch with a calculating eye that set Ethan on edge right away. Ethan called out, keeping the rifle in plain sight. "Can I help you with something?" The man's smile had too many teeth. "You must be Cole. I heard Silas finally sold this place before he passed on. My name is Robert Dawson. My ranch is just north of here." Ethan recognized the name. His wife, Lydia, had spoken of him with a bitter taste in her voice. Dawson's ranch was a giant, 10 times the size of their valley. "What brings you away out here, Mr. Dawson?" "Just being a good neighbor. I wanted to see how you were settling in. This is a tough country for a newcomer." Dawson's gaze swept over everything. "Silas and I had our disagreements, but I admired what he built. It would be a shame to see it all go to ruin." The words were an insult wrapped in false concern, and Ethan's jaw tightened. "The place is doing fine for now," Dawson continued, but winter has only just begun. You are one man trying to do the work of 3. Silas had help, and he knew this land for years. You have neither." Dawson shifted in his expensive leather saddle. "I am ready to make you a fair offer. It is more than fair, really. You could leave with enough money to start over somewhere easier." So that was the real reason for his visit, a vulture circling a new meal. "This property is not for sale. Everything is for sale if the price is right. Before you get stubborn, think about this. I own the water rights upstream. If I build a dam or change the creek's path, this whole valley will turn to dust. Your cattle will die. Your land will be worthless." The smile was gone, replaced by a cold hardness. "I am giving you a chance to get out with something. You should be smart about it." Just then, the door to the house creaked open. Lydia stepped onto the porch holding her father's shotgun. Her voice was sharp. "My husband already gave you his answer, Dawson. This land is not for sale. It was not for sale when my father was alive, and it is not for sale now. You can ride back to your ranch." Dawson turned his attention to her. "Mrs. Cole, I am sorry about your father. He was a stubborn man. I hope you have better sense." "My father taught me all I need to know about men like you," Lydia said. "You have wanted this valley for 20 years, and the answer is still no. Now, leave our land." For a second, Dawson's polite mask fell away, revealing a man who always got what he wanted. Then the false smile returned. "It is your choice. But when this land is nothing but dirt, do not come to me for help. This offer will not last forever." He spurred his horse and rode away, leaving tracks in the snow. Ethan watched him go, his hands tight on his rifle, a slow anger burning inside him. When Dawson was gone, he looked at Lydia. She stood on the porch, shotgun in hand, her face pale, but her eyes fierce. "He meant what he said about the water," she said quietly. "He threatened my father with it for years." "He thinks we are easy targets now that your father is gone," Ethan said, walking up the porch steps. "He thinks I am just some ranch hand who will run at the first sign of a problem." "Are you not?" she asked. The question was not mean, just honest. "You have only been here 2 months. Dawson has been trying to take this land for 2 decades. He has money and men. What do we have?" "We have the legal deed," Ethan said, now standing beside her. "And I did not come all this way just to be scared off by some rich rancher. If he wants a fight, then he will get one." A flicker of something new appeared in Lydia's eyes, maybe surprise or even respect. "You really mean that?" I gave my word to work this land and protect it. That includes from men like Dawson. He pointed toward the valley, beautiful and white under the winter sun. This is ours now. I will not let him take it from us. For the first time, Lydia gave him a real smile. It was small, but it was there. Then I suppose we are in this together. I suppose we are, Ethan replied. They stood there for a moment, the cold air sharp in their lungs, looking at the land that was their home. It was not the life either of them had planned, but it was theirs to defend. And for the first time, Ethan felt they were truly on the same side. After Dawson's visit, a new tension hung in the air. Ethan checked the creek's water level every single morning. He rode the fence lines constantly, making sure their boundaries were clear. The work felt different now. It was not just about surviving, it was about defending their home. Lydia felt it too. She was quieter, always watching. Ethan would sometimes see her staring out the window with that same determined look she had when she faced Dawson. That man, Dawson, was a shadow hanging over them, and Lydia stared out at his land as if her own grit could keep him at bay. One night she laid her father's old ledgers on the kitchen table. The numbers were thin, but they'd hold. "If he dams that creek," she said, her voice tight, "we'll lose our summer grazing. We'd have to sell half the herd to survive." Ethan leaned back. "Those water rights your father filed, they're solid?" "Signed and sealed in 1867, she confirmed, pulling out a brittle yellow document. "Ironclad legal. Then he's breaking the law if he touches that water." Lydia gave a weary sigh. "The nearest lawman is a 4-day ride. The damage would be done long before he ever showed up. That's how fellas like Dawson work. They stomp all over the line, and by the time the law arrives, it all looks like a simple disagreement." Ethan watched her in the lamplight. She looked tired. "Your father dealt with this often?" "He ran Dawson's men off more than once. One time they cut our fence, and my father rode over and got our cattle back. I heard one of Dawson's boys left with a busted jaw." She said it plainly, like reciting the weather. "After that, they kept their distance mostly, but they never stopped wanting this valley." "Why here? He's got thousands of acres." "It's the water," she said, closing the book. "This valley controls the creek that feeds 3 other ranches, his included. Owning this place means controlling the water for half the territory. My father always said Dawson didn't want the land. He wanted the power it would give him over everyone else." It was a familiar, ugly kind of greed. "Well, he's not getting it," Ethan said, his voice low and steady. "I've seen his type before. Men who think money lets them push folks around. This is our land, and I'm not some hired hand that's going to roll over." Lydia looked at him a long, hard moment, then gave a slow nod. "All right, then. We have to be smart. We'll keep a record of everything. Document the water levels. Note down any time his crew comes near." "Agreed," Ethan said. "And we'll check every inch of our fences. No room for excuses." They spent the next hour bent over a map, planning. It was the first time they felt like true partners. When they were done, Lydia stopped at her door. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not taking his offer." "Easier isn't always right," Ethan replied, picking up his lamp. "I made a promise. I aim to keep it." She just nodded and shut her door. That night, the house felt a little less empty. They were partners now, bound by a shared fight. It wasn't love, not even friendship yet, but it was something solid. Christmas came and went without much fuss. But that evening, Lydia brought out a bottle of her father's whiskey. "To survive in the first season," she toasted. "To many more," he answered. They drank in a comfortable quiet. Outside, a soft snow started to fall, blanketing the valley in white. It was a beautiful, hard country, and Ethan reckoned it was worth fighting for. He thought, just maybe, they had a chance. January brought a false spring that turned everything to mud, then froze it solid again. That's when Ethan saw them. 3 riders on the ridge deep inside his property line. Dawson's men. They just sat on their horses, watching. The message was clear as day. We go where we please. Ethan fought the urge to ride up there and start something. Instead, he remembered Lydia's words about being smart and rode back to the house, a cold anger settling in his gut. Lydia took one look at his face. What is it? 3 of Dawson's men, up on the North Ridge, a good half-mile onto our land. Her jaw went tight. They knew exactly where they were. She wiped her cold, red hands on her apron. We can't just let them treat this place like it's open range. No, we can't, Lydia said, already heading for the door. Come on, we're writing this down, the date, the time, exactly where you saw them. Then what? Then you ride to the territorial office and file a complaint for trespassing. That's a 4-day round trip. I know, she said, her voice firm. But it builds a record. My father taught me that men like Dawson count on good people being too tired or scared to do the paperwork. Inside, she pulled out a file. Ethan saw several other reports, all written in her father's hand, detailing years of the same trouble. He was always watching, she said quietly. I won't let his work be for nothing. The next morning, before the sun was up, Ethan saddled his horse. The formal complaint was sealed in his bag. He was leaving Lydia alone, but this was the first real shot in their fight. This was how they would win. I have the shotgun, and I know how to use it, she had told him that morning as he prepared his horse. Dawson is not stupid enough to try something while you're in town filing an official complaint. He will wait. I can handle anyone who comes by. Just get there and back in one piece. She gave him a package of food for the trip. And stick to the main trail. It is longer, but it is much safer this time of year. He nodded, hating to leave her alone. He had the urge to say something more, to tell her to be careful, but he knew Lydia did not need his words for protection. He just tipped his hat and rode away. The journey to the town of Medicine Rock was cold and long. For 2 days he saw nothing but empty frozen land and a lone mail carrier who nodded as they passed. At night he built a small fire and slept with his rifle nearby, listening to the coyotes howl at the stars. Medicine Rock was not much more than a single dusty street, but it was the closest thing to civilization in that part of Wyoming. It had a territorial office, which was all that mattered to Ethan. Ethan filed the complaint against Dawson. The clerk barely gave it a glance before taking his fee and stamping a receipt. This is about Dawson again, is it not? The clerk asked, sounding bored. You know about him? Everyone knows about him. We have complaints from ranchers in 3 different counties. Nothing ever happens. The clerk slid the receipt to Ethan. But at least you have your paperwork done for all the good it will do. It was not comforting, but it was what Ethan had expected. The law was a far-off idea out here. Having the proof that they followed the rules was what counted. He was loading supplies onto his horse when a man called his name. He was a middle-aged cattleman with a weathered face. You are Cole, right? The one who bought the Grant place. That is right. The man looked around before speaking in a low voice. My name is Henderson. My ranch is about 20 miles east of yours. I wanted to give you some advice. I am listening. Dawson has been pushing people out for a long time. He starts by testing your fences, then he starts stealing your cattle. If you resist, he makes your life difficult with legal troubles and damages. I knew 3 ranchers who sold to him in the last 5 years. The ones who refused to sell, Henderson just shook his head. One man's barn burned down. Another rancher lost half his herd to bad water. Nothing you could prove, but everybody knew who was behind it. The man in the store, Henderson, pulled me aside. I am just saying be careful and know who you are up against. Silas Grant was tough as a $2 steak and he barely held on. You are new and you have a wife to think about. Sometimes the smart play is to take a fair price and find easier land somewhere else. This land is not for sale, I told him. Henderson just nodded. Then you watch your back. The ride home felt twice as long. I thought about those burned barns and poisoned wells. I thought about Lydia, alone out at the house. Walking away meant letting a man like Dawson win. It meant throwing away every dollar I had ever saved. It meant giving up on the only thing I had ever worked for. And it meant failing Lydia. She had accepted a marriage she never wanted just to keep her home. Leaving now would be breaking the only promise that mattered between us. I pushed my horse hard, anxious to get back and see that she was safe. She was standing on the porch when I rode up, with smoke curling from the chimney. "Any trouble?" I called out. "Nothing I could not handle." "You get it filed?" "I got it filed," I said, swinging down from the saddle. "But I heard some things that are not so good." Inside, while she served up some hot stew, I told her everything Henderson had warned me about. She listened, her face getting more serious with every word. "I have heard those stories," she said when I was done. "My father was worried. Henderson said your father was just barely holding on." "My father was sick for the last year," she said, her voice steady and hard. "And he was doing the work of 3 men. Of course, he was barely holding on." "We are not giving up," Lydia said, her voice as firm as the Texas soil. She wasn't just talking about a piece of land, she was talking about her entire world. "My father is buried on that hill, and my mother is right beside him. Every single inch of this valley holds my family's sweat and blood. I am not about to let Dawson take it from us." Her words hung in the quiet cabin, a clear declaration of war against a man with all the money and power. This was a fight for home, a fight for what's right. If you have ever felt like the underdog, you know this feeling. Ethan looked at her and saw the same fire he'd seen when she faced Dawson's men with a shotgun. He knew how dangerous this could get, but a calm resolve settled over him. "All right," he said. "Then we fight. But we are going to do it smart." They planned by the fire, using her father's old maps. "The creek is everything," she explained, her finger tracing the blue line. "If Dawson tries to dam it, we have to catch him doing it. That is our only real shot." A terrible blizzard hit in February, trapping them inside for a solid week. The world shrank to just the 4 walls of the cabin and the sound of howling wind. In that forced quiet, they started to share pieces of their past. One night, huddled close to the stove for warmth, Lydia finally spoke of her childhood. "My mother used to sing," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the dancing flames. "She filled this whole house with her beautiful voice. After she passed away, everything just went quiet." Ethan understood that kind of silence all too well. "My brother used to tell stories," he offered, his voice low. "He could spin these grand tales of heroes and adventures. After he was gone, I could not stand to hear them anymore. It just reminded me of what I lost." They sat together for a long while, sharing in their separate griefs. "I am glad you are here," she finally said, looking right at him. It was the most personal thing she had ever said. A warmth spread through Ethan's chest that had nothing to do with the fire. "This place is worth fighting for," he replied. "And so are you." In that moment, a small seed of trust was planted. When the storm broke on the 8th day, they dug their way out into a new world, ready for the fight ahead. Everything felt wrong the second Ethan saw the creek. The house was fine, standing strong against the snow, but out here, the water was low, a good 6 inches lower than it ought to be. Downstream, he found nothing. No ice jams, no fallen trees. The problem was farther up. Someone was stealing their water. He spurred his horse into a gallop, a cold fury rising in his chest. When Lydia saw his face, she dropped her shovel. "It is the creek," he said, breathless. "Someone's diverted it upstream on Dawson's side of the line." Her face hardened. "We ride out now," she declared. "We need proof, or Dawson will just lie his way out of it." Ethan knew she was right. They had to document the crime, but the journey to Medicine Rock and back would take over a week in this weather. This was the kind of injustice that could break a person, but it was also a fight for everything they had. We all face battles that seem impossible, but sometimes standing your ground is the only choice you have. Lydia was already heading for the barn. "I'm not staying here alone, and I'm not letting you ride into a possible trap by yourself. This is my land too, Ethan. My fight. We do this together." He watched her for a moment, then nodded. "Give me 10 minutes," she said. "And we are bringing the rifles." They rode north, the snow making the journey slow and hard. Lydia handled her horse with a quiet skill that Ethan admired. 2 miles past their property marker, they found it. A rough dam of rocks and logs, funneling their water away toward Dawson's ranch. It was a crude piece of work, but it was effective. It was theft, plain and simple. "That snake," Lydia whispered, her voice tight with anger. Ethan was already off his horse, inspecting the dam. The cuts on the logs were fresh. "They did this during the storm," he said, "when they knew we would be stuck inside." Lydia scanned the trees, her rifle ready. "My father always said Dawson was too clever to do his own dirty work out in the open." Ethan took out a notebook and began to sketch the dam, taking measurements and noting the direction of the new channel. Every detail was another nail for Dawson's coffin. "We could tear it down right now," Lydia suggested, her hand gripping the stock of her rifle. "And have no proof," Ethan countered, his joints aching from the cold. "They would just rebuild it and call us liars. No, we do this by the book. We leave it, we file charges, and then we come back with the law on our side." He hated it as much as she did, leaving this poison in their creek. But if they took the law into their own hands, they would be the ones to lose. They had to be smarter than Dawson. That night, they made a small, cold camp. As Ethan took the first watch, he could hear the weakened trickle of the creek, a sound that felt like their future drying up. He thought about the stories of other ranchers Dawson had pushed out. Was this how it started for them, too? It was a hard thing trusting in a system that might be rigged against you from the start. "You should get some rest," Lydia said from her bedroll. She sat up, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "My father fought that man for 20 years, she said softly, staring into the flames. "It cost him his health and his peace. I used to wonder why he did not just sell out. Now I get it. It was not just about the land, it was about not letting a man like Dawson win." She looked at Ethan, her eyes clear and steady. "At first, I thought I was just finishing his fight. But now this is my home. I will not lose it, because I did not fight hard enough." Ethan knew exactly what she meant. "We will hold it," he said, "whatever it takes." She offered a small smile. "We," she repeated. "I guess we really are partners in this, are not we?" "It did not start how we planned," Ethan admitted. "But this fight is real, this valley is ours, so yes, we are partners." "Then we better make sure we win," she said. 5 days later, they stood in the territorial office in Medicine Rock. They were tired down to the bone, but they were determined. The clerk barely glanced at their carefully prepared documents. "What a diversion," he said with a sigh. "You are on the list." "This is a crime," Ethan insisted. "Someone needs to investigate." The clerk finally looked up, a smug look on his face. "Someone will get to it. We have a backlog 6 months deep. By then, our land will be ruined without that water." "Then you better hope for a miracle," the clerk said. "Or you could just settle with Mr. Dawson. That is usually how these things work out." The clerk's words hung in the air, a clear and ugly message. The local law was bought and paid for. For a moment, it felt like they had lost. But then Lydia squeezed his arm, her grip like iron. They had one last card to play. Lydia's voice was steady. "We will wait on the investigation, and we will be back." Out on the frozen street, Ethan wanted to hit something. 6 months. They might as well have said forever. A piece of paper in some dusty office meant nothing. Lydia's face was like stone. "Now it is on record," she said. "If something happens, they will know why." That was not much comfort. They bought supplies and rode for home in a heavy silence. 3 days later, they found the creek running even lower. A note was on their porch, held down by a rock. Ethan read it out loud. "Final offer, $10,000 for the property. Offer is gone at the end of the month. After that, I will take it anyway. R. Dawson." Lydia snatched the paper and crushed it. That is his answer to our rights. He is telling us the law does not matter. He is telling us to get out. Then we will make him care, Ethan said, his own voice sounding hard. We will tear down his dam tonight. Let us see him try to rebuild it on our land. Ethan was done playing a game where only he had to follow the rules. He looked at Lydia, and her eyes held the same fire he felt in his gut. All right, then, she said. Let us go to war. They rode back to the dam that same night, with only the moon to light their way. The air was so cold their breath turned to frost. The anger inside Ethan kept him warm. Lydia rode beside him, quiet and determined, her rifle resting across her saddle. At the dam, Ethan jumped down and started ripping at the logs with his bare hands. He was too angry for tools. The wood was frozen solid, but he tore into it with months of fury. Lydia used a heavy branch to pry rocks loose. They worked without a word. It took them 2 hours of hard labor to undo Dawson's work. By the end, Ethan's hands were raw and bleeding, but the creek was free. It flowed cold and clear toward their valley, right where it belonged. He will know by morning, Lydia said, washing her hands in the icy stream. His men ride this way. Good, Ethan replied. Let him know. Let him know we are not running. The pain in his hands felt good, like he had finally done something real. If he wants this land, he can come to try and take it himself. They made camp right there, out in the open, a clear challenge to Dawson. The night was quiet. Just before dawn, Lydia spoke. You know this will make it worse. We have drawn a line in the sand. He was never going to back down anyway, Ethan said, poking the fire. At least now we are fighting back. Your father taught you to use the law. What did he teach you about a real fight? He taught me to shoot straight, she said. And he taught me to never let them see your fear. She stood and rolled her bedding. Sometimes you have to make a stand and dare them to cross it, and that is what we are doing. As the sun came up, they rode for home. The creek ran full beside them, a welcome sight. It was their water, their land. They had defended their right to it. But that feeling died the moment they saw the smoke over the ridge. A thick, black column rose from where their barn was supposed to be. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs as he spurred his horse into a run. Lydia was right there with him. The barn was not just on fire. It was a raging inferno. Flames shot high into the winter sky. The heat pushed them back when they were still far away. Ethan could hear the terrible sound of the cattle trapped inside. The stock, Lydia cried, jumping from her horse to run toward the blaze. Ethan grabbed her and pulled her back. You cannot go in there. The whole thing is coming down. We have to save them, she screamed, fighting against him. It is too late, he said, holding her tight. The roof is gone. The barn collapsed with a deafening roar, silencing the awful screams from within. Lydia went limp in his arms, a terrible sound of rage and grief tearing from her throat. They could only stand and watch it burn to the ground. All that was left of Silas Grant's dream was smoldering ash. 20 cattle gone. The barn, which had stood for 30 years, was a black skeleton against the sky. Everything they owned, their tools, their feed, was just gone. When the last flame sputtered out, Lydia walked toward the ruin. Ethan followed, his heart a heavy stone in his chest. She stopped where the barn door used to be and stared. That was Dawson's work, she said, her voice hollow. He sent his men the second we started tearing down his dam. Ethan wanted to argue, but he saw the look in her eyes. It was a cold, hard certainty. Henderson warned us this would happen, she said. This is what he does to folks who stand up to him. We gave him the excuse he was looking for. The weight of it all crushed down on Ethan. She was right. They had poked the bear, and the bear had mauled them. But then, in the smoky haze, he saw it. A glint of metal near the back wall. A kerosene can, half melted but not theirs. Theirs was kept in the shed. Lydia, look, he said, pointing. That's evidence. They got careless. A flicker of life returned to Lydia's eyes as she saw the can. We need to make a sketch of it and add it to the complaint, she said, her voice gaining strength. He thinks he can burn us out, that we'll just tuck tail and run. He's dead wrong. They spent the next hour picking through the debris. They found 3 sets of boot prints in the snow, heading straight north toward Dawson's property. Ethan drew them carefully, noting the tread and size. It was more proof to add to a pile that no one in power seemed to care about. Their house was safe, and so were the few cows in the far pasture, but it was small comfort. They'd lost their best animals, their shelter, and all their winter feed. That night, with the evidence on the kitchen table, Ethan ran the numbers. "We've got about 3 months before we're flat broke," he said softly. "Without the barn, we can't protect the cattle we have left, and without feed—" He couldn't finish. "We can rebuild," Lydia offered, but her voice was thin. "Take out a loan?" Ethan shook his head. "Every bank in this territory has a connection to Dawson." "He's got us cornered," Ethan said, pushing the papers away. "No matter which way we turn, he wins." "No," Lydia said, standing so fast her chair screeched on the wood floor. "I will not accept that. There has to be another way." "Then you tell me what it is, because I am all out of ideas," he said, hating the sound of his own defeat. "We did everything by the book, and all we got was a pile of ash." "So you're saying we should just give up? Let him win?" Her voice was sharp with fear. "I'm saying maybe your father was wrong. Maybe some fights just can't be won." The slap was sharp and fast. He looked at her, his cheek stinging, and saw a fire in her eyes. "Don't you dare," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You made a promise to me in front of a preacher. You promised to protect this land. Are you giving up the second it gets hard?" "Hard?" Ethan stood up. "Lydia, our barn is gone. Our livelihood is dead. This ain't hard, it's impossible." "My father faced impossible for 20 years, and he never once quit. He worked himself to dust for this place. Was it just so you could marry a man you don't know and lose it all anyway?" The words hit her hard, but he couldn't stop them. "Maybe I should have just let him sell. Taken the cash and found you a good husband instead of tying you to this ranch." "You know nothing about my father," she shot back, tears in her eyes, but her voice steady. "And you sure don't know a thing about me. I never wanted this marriage, but I did it to save my home." "Now you're telling me it was pointless?" "I'm telling you I don't know how to win," Ethan confessed, the truth tearing out of him. "I can't protect you. I am just a logger who thought saving money made him a rancher. But I am not him. I am not the man you need." The hard truth hung between them in the quiet kitchen. He felt all his confidence crumble. "You are right," she said softly. "My father never would have admitted he was scared." "Well, I am terrified," Ethan said. "Terrified of failing you." "You think I am not scared?" she asked, with a laugh that held no joy. "I wake up every day wondering if this is the day Dawson finally breaks us. But being scared does not mean you quit. It just means you know the stakes." Ethan sagged into his chair, the anger gone, replaced by pure exhaustion. "So what is the plan?" Lydia sat across from him, her voice firm once more. "We make him come to us. On our land. We will bait him into doing something so obvious that even the law has to step in. How do we do that?" "We rebuild," she said, her eyes shining with a fierce light. "Not the barn, but a new corral, right by the road where everyone can see it. We will make him think his fire did not break us. We will make him think we are winning. And when he rides in to finish the job, we will be waiting." A little bit of hope sparked in Ethan's chest. "With witnesses and proof. It is a big gamble. If he does not take the bait, we have wasted everything. And if he does—" She trailed off. "Still better than waiting around to get run over." Ethan reached out and took her hand. "Partners," he said. "Partners," she agreed. They started the next day. Ethan hauled logs, his hands raw and bleeding. Lydia laid out the corral where Dawson's men would have a clear view. Each post they hammered into the ground was a message. "We are still here." On the third day, 4 riders watched them from a ridge above. Ethan recognized one of them. He made sure to give them a long, slow wave. a gesture that was half greeting and half challenge. They watched for an hour before riding off. The bait was set. A week later, the corral was done. They moved the last 15 head of cattle into it. It was a sorry sight, but from a distance it looked like they were recovering. "Now we wait," Lydia said. They took turns standing watch all through the night, rifles loaded and close. The quiet was heavy. Every snap of a twig made them jump. "He is planning something," Lydia said one evening. "Dawson does not do things small." "Good," Ethan replied, checking his rifle again. "We cannot prove small. His deadline from the bank is in 4 days." The answer came on the third day. Ethan heard the sound of many horses and sprinted for the house. Lydia was already on the porch with a shotgun. 8 riders came up the trail, led by Robert Dawson himself. He stopped his expensive horse right at their property line. "Mr. Cole, Mrs. Cole," he called out, "I see you have been productive. This is our land, Dawson." "You are not welcome," Ethan yelled back. "I am on the public road, which is my right," Dawson said with a cold smile. "My offer to buy you out expires tonight at midnight." "We are not selling," Lydia stated flatly. "Before you say another word, you should know something." Dawson signaled to one of his men who held up a document. "I filed a legal claim on this creek's water rights. My lawyer found a little mistake in your father's original paperwork. As of 3 days ago, I own the water that runs through your land." "That is impossible," Ethan said, a chill running down his spine. "The rights were registered." "Were," Dawson corrected him, clearly enjoying himself. "A surveyor found the boundary was marked wrong back in 1867, which means your father never owned the water. And neither do you. That is a lie." Lydia's voice trembled with rage. "My father surveyed this land himself." "You can argue with the territorial office," Dawson said smoothly. "Oh, wait, you cannot, because they already agreed with me. So, you have until midnight to take my $10,000. After that, I turn off the water, and your land becomes worthless." "You cannot do this," Ethan said, knowing it was useless. "I already have. The papers are filed. You have been beaten, Mr. Cole. Midnight. After that, this land is mine for a whole lot less." He turned his horse and rode away, leaving them standing there in stunned silence. Their trap, their fight, all of it had been for nothing. "Your father won with paperwork and connections," Ethan shot back. Lydia's voice went quiet, but it was firm as bedrock. "No, I don't believe that. My father's survey was legal. If we can just prove it." "How?" Ethan asked, the fight draining out of him. "The surveyor already sided with Dawson. It would cost a fortune. We don't have to fight it." He sank back into his chair. "He's won, Lydia. We have to decide if we take his money or lose it all." "Or we fight," she said. "With what? We have 15 cows, no barn, and no feed. What are we going to fight with?" She stared out the window for a long moment. "With each other," she finally said, her voice soft but sure. "Isn't that what you said? That we're partners?" Ethan looked at his wife, at the fight in her eyes that had drawn him to her in the first place, and he couldn't bring himself to quit. "All right," he said, "we fight. But we do it smart." "No more grandstanding," Ethan continued. "We find real proof that Dawson's claim is a lie. The official documents are in an office Dawson owns. We need something he can't get his hands on." His mind was racing. "Did your father keep any copies of his survey?" "He kept records of everything," she said, already heading for her father's office. "If proof exists, it's in there." For hours, they dug through 30 years of Silas Grant's life. They covered the table with maps, letters, and account books. And then they started finding it. A letter from the original surveyor, dated 1867, confirming the property lines. A statement from a man who helped Silas stake the claim. It was all there, clear as day. "This is it," Lydia said, her hand shaking as she held the letter. "This proves Dawson is a liar. There was no error in the survey." Ethan nodded, but his mind was already on the next step. He'll just say the original surveyor was the one who made the mistake. We have to be ready for that. The problem was back in 1867, not today. We just need a surveyor right now to prove the original lines were true. An honest one somebody Dawson can't get his hands on. Lydia gathered their papers. Tom Henderson. He surveyed before he took up ranching. He'd know what these mean, and he's the one who warned you about Dawson. It was a long shot, but it was their only shot. Ethan glanced at the sun dipping low. Henderson's place is 20 miles out. Even riding hard, we'll be lucky to make it back by midnight. Then we ride hard, Lydia said, already moving. It's this or it's over, and I'm not going down without a fight. They saddled their best horses, pushing them into the growing dark faster than was smart on the slick ground. Their proof, every last piece of it, was wrapped in oilcloth and tied to Ethan's saddle. As they raced toward Henderson's, leaving their whole world behind, Ethan prayed to whoever was listening that 20 years of careful records and one good man would be enough to save their home. His horse was getting tired, and he could hear Lydia's struggling right behind him, but they couldn't let up. Every tick of the clock brought them closer to midnight, closer to losing it all. When Henderson's ranch finally appeared through the snow, Ethan felt a wave of relief that almost buckled his knees. He swung down from his horse, legs trembling, as Lydia came up beside him, clutching the documents. Before they even knocked, the door swung open. Henderson stood there, backlit by a lantern. Cole. What in the world? He saw the snow on their clothes and the desperation on their faces. Get yourselves inside. The warmth of the house hit them like a wall. Ethan's hands started to burn as the feeling came back. Henderson's wife got them coffee and blankets without a word, her kind face full of worry. Dawson, Ethan said as soon as he could feel his lips again. He's claiming our water rights. Says a surveyor found a mistake in the old 1867 survey. Henderson's expression hardened. Let me guess. Gave you till midnight to sell out. How'd you know? He pulled that same stunt on the Martins 3 years back. Used a different story, but it ended the same. They were broke before the courts ever heard the case. Henderson took the papers from Lydia and laid them out on his kitchen table. What do you need from me? You were a surveyor, Lydia said, her voice still trembling. Can you tell if the old survey was right? Was there any mistake? Henderson put on his spectacles and started looking over the documents, his wife holding a lamp close. The only sound was the clock on the mantel, eating away their time. After about 20 minutes, he looked up, his face serious. There's no error here. These papers are clean as a whistle and match the boundaries perfectly. Whoever told Dawson there's a mistake is either a fool or a liar. Can you put that in writing? Ethan asked. Something that will hold up? I can write an assessment, Cole, but Dawson has the current territorial surveyor on his payroll. It'll be my word against an official. A judge will side with the office. Yeah. He tapped the papers. This proves you're right, but it won't stop him in time. So what do we do? Ethan felt his hope begin to fade. You make him play his hand where folks can see it. Henderson got out some ink and paper. I'll write up my report. Tomorrow, you take it and these documents straight to the federal marshal in Cheyenne. Not the local office, the federal one. Water disputes that cross territory lines are their business, and Dawson ain't bought those judges yet. Cheyenne is a 5-day ride, Lydia said. His deadline is tonight. Then you let him miss it. Let him think he's won. Let him shut off your water. Henderson kept writing, his hand steady. The moment he diverts water he doesn't own, he's committed a federal crime. And with this proof that you tried to settle it proper, you've got him pinned. Our cattle will die, Ethan said. We've got 15 head left, right? Bring 'em to my place. I've got enough pasture to see them through the winter. Leave them here. You ride to Cheyenne, file the complaint, and come back with the law. It ain't perfect. You'll lose time and money, but you'll keep your land. And Dawson will finally answer for what he's been doing to people. Ethan looked at Lydia. He saw his own weariness in her eyes, but he also saw that fire that never quit. What do you say? I think we've been trying to fight fair with a man who doesn't know the meaning of the word. She turned to Henderson. If we do this, we're trusting you with the last thing we have. I know. Henderson's wife stepped up and put a hand on Lydia's arm. We lost our girl to a fever 2 years ago. She'd have been about your age. Let us help y'all the way we'd want someone to help her. Lydia's tough exterior cracked for just a second. Thank you, she whispered. They stayed the night, too tired to even think about riding back. Henderson finished his official assessment while his wife gave them hot stew, the first decent meal Ethan had tasted in days. Henderson signed the document and had his wife witness it. One last thing, Henderson said as they got ready to leave at dawn. In Cheyenne, you ask for Marshal Thomas Garrett. Tell him I sent you. He's an honest man who can't stand a bully. Ethan shook Henderson's hand, unable to find the right words to thank him. Lydia hugged Henderson's wife, a long and silent embrace. Then they rode back toward their valley, slower this time, already thinking about the long ride ahead. By the time they got home, the sun was high. From the ridge, they could see them. Dawson's men were already down by the creek, starting on a new dam. Right on schedule, Lydia said, her voice tight. Good. The faster he works, the bigger his crime. Let's get the cattle moved to Henderson's, Ethan said. It took them nearly all day to round up the herd and push them the 20 miles. The animals were confused and stubborn, not wanting to leave their home ground. By the time the last of the 15 head were safe at Henderson's, Ethan and Lydia were bone-tired. But there was no rest. Cheyenne was waiting. They returned to their house one last time for supplies. It felt so empty, so quiet, knowing they were about to leave it all behind. As Ethan walked through their quiet home, he noticed things he'd never seen before. The worn spot on the porch rail where Silas must have rested his hand every day. The way the light hit the kitchen in the afternoon. It's a strange feeling, Lydia said from behind him. I've lived here my whole life. Now we're leaving, and I don't know when we'll be back. We'll be back, Ethan promised, trying to sound more certain than he felt. And it'll still be ours. They left at dawn with all their proof and every last dollar they owned. The 5-day ride to Cheyenne was cold and hard. On the third night, sitting by a crackling fire, Lydia broke the silence. I'm sorry. For what? For slapping you, she said quietly. And for the things I said. Ethan poked the fire, sending sparks up into the dark sky. You were right to slap me. I was ready to give up, and that's not what partners do. No, she said, pulling her blanket tighter. You were being honest. It takes courage to admit you're scared. I always thought that was strength. But maybe real strength is knowing when you are in over your head and asking for help, like riding 5 days to find a lawman we have never met. Exactly like that, she agreed with a small smile. We are either brave or foolish, probably a bit of both. Across the campfire, Ethan looked at the woman he had been forced to marry. She had every reason to hate him, but she had become his partner. When this is over, what do you want? Not just the land. For yourself. Lydia was quiet for a long moment. I want to wake up and not be afraid, she finally said. I want to feel like this marriage is real, not just a contract to keep our land. Ethan's heart beat faster. I know this started as a business deal, he said, but for me, somewhere along the road, it became more than that. She kept her eyes on the fire. When you stood with me against Dawson, it meant something. You meant something. Do you think I am still here just for a piece of dirt? He moved to sit beside her. This land is nothing without the water, and we might lose it all. But I am still here because this stopped being about property. It started being about our home. She finally turned to him, her eyes shining in the firelight. You truly mean that? I married a stranger to save my land, he said. But I would ride into hell for the woman you are now. He took her hand. If you will have me when this is done, I would like for us to be married for real. Not because we have to be, but because I cannot see a life without you. Tears filled Lydia's eyes, but she was smiling. That is the most romantic thing you have ever said. I am not a romantic man, he admitted, but I am loyal, and I care about you more than I ever thought I could. She kissed him then, a soft and quiet promise. "Let us win this fight first," she whispered against him. "Then we can learn what being married for real means. Deal." They rode into Cheyenne on the 5th day, the busy town a shock after so many months alone. They walked straight to the federal marshal's office. Marshal Thomas Garrett was a man who looked like he had seen it all. He listened to their story without a word, his eyes sharp and intelligent as he studied their maps and notes. He read the letter from their friend Sam Henderson twice. "So," Garrett said, leaning back, "you are saying Dawson created a fake boundary dispute to steal your water, and when that did not work, he burned your barn." "Yes, sir," Ethan said. "We have evidence, but the local office told us we are on a 6-month waiting list." Garrett nodded slowly. "Sam Henderson's word means something to me, and your evidence looks solid." He paused. "Dawson has been on my list for a while. I have been waiting for him to make a mistake this big." A slow grin spread across the marshal's face. "He just made one. Boys, I think it is time we paid Mr. Dawson a visit. And this time, we are not going to be filing a complaint. We are going to be serving a warrant." They rode back not as victims, but as deputies. They found Dawson's men at the dam, and Dawson himself arrived just in time for Garrett to arrest him red-handed. Seeing him in cuffs was a victory sweeter than any rain. The water flowed freely again, and back at the ranch, Ethan and Lydia watched the creek rise, knowing they had won more than just their land. They had proven that even when the law seems broken, fighting together the right way is the only way to make things right. The fight took them to a federal marshal in Medicine Rock named Marty Garrett. He listened to their whole story, his expression unreadable. "I am afraid Dawson's lawyers will just tie us up in court for years," Ethan said, feeling his hope begin to fade. "That is where you are mistaken," Garrett said, getting to his feet and walking to a large map. "Federal law is perfectly clear. He cannot divert water from a prior legal claim without due process. What he did is not a civil matter, Mr. Cole. It is theft, and I can arrest him for it." Hope roared back to life inside Ethan. "What do you need from us?" he asked. Garrett pulled on his coat. "I need to catch him in the act. I will ride back with y'all. Let us go get your valley back." The 3-day ride back was hard and fast, fueled by the feeling that the law was finally on their side. They reached the ridge overlooking their valley just as the sun was coming up. And there he was. Dawson, big as life, supervising the work on his illegal dam. The creek running through their land was barely a trickle. "That is him," Ethan said, pointing. Garrett raised a small spyglass. "That is him, and those are his men. That is everything I need." He laid out the plan, his voice low and steady. "You two will stay here out of sight. I am going down there alone. I will identify myself and place him under arrest. You will not interfere unless I give a signal. This has to be done completely by the book." From the ridge, they watched Marshal Garrett ride straight toward the dam. They saw the surprise on Dawson's face when he realized this was not some local lawman he could bribe. The confrontation was very brief. When Garrett's hand went to his pistol, Dawson's face turned dark with fury, but he knew he was beaten. He rode off with the marshal, a prisoner at last. The other men just mounted up and drifted away, leaving the dam standing empty. Ethan and Lydia rode down to their stolen creek. The water was still low, but the long fight was finally over. "Is it really finished?" Lydia asked, her voice barely a whisper. "His power is," Ethan said, looking at their peaceful valley. "He will never threaten us again." Lydia walked to the edge of the creek, and a slow, beautiful smile spread across her face. Their home was theirs once more. It was a feeling of pure relief mixed with bone-deep exhaustion and a quiet joy. They had actually done it. Ethan came and stood beside her, and for the second time they started taking apart the dam. This time there was no fear of what might happen, no looking over their shoulders. They worked hard until the water ran free again, flowing cold and clear down its natural path toward the valley that needed it so badly. As they finished their work, the setting sun painted the snow in hues of orange and gold. They stood on the creek bank, tired and covered in dirt, but happy in a way Ethan had not felt since he first laid eyes on this land. "Come on," Lydia said, taking his hand gently. "Let's head on home." The house was cold and dark when they got back, the fire having died out hours ago. But Ethan soon had the stove roaring while Lydia lit the lamps, filling the rooms with warmth and a soft glow. They were too worn out to cook a real meal, so they sat in comfortable silence at the kitchen table, eating bread and cheese with the last of the jam Mrs. Henderson had given them. "We'll need to rebuild the barn," Lydia said after a while, "and bring the cattle back and get the fields ready for spring." "We have a lot to do," Ethan agreed. "But now we have time, and we have each other." She gave him a smile from across the table. In that moment, he saw the strong, fierce woman he had married. But he also saw something more, something that had grown between them during their long fight. It was trust and affection and the real beginnings of love. "I meant what I said by the fire," he said softly. He reminded her about wanting a true marriage between them. "I know you did," she replied. "And I meant it too." She stood up and offered him her hand. "But I reckon we've earned a proper first night as husband and wife, don't you?" Ethan took her hand, and she led him to the bedroom where she had spent so many nights alone. It was a small, simple room with a window that looked out over their valley. In the moonlight bouncing off the snow, they could see the tall mountains standing watch over their home. They discovered each other that night with a tenderness that only comes from fighting a battle together, from surviving, and from choosing one another out of real care instead of need. When Ethan finally drifted to sleep with Lydia in his arms, he felt a sense of peace he had not known since his brother passed away. He felt like he belonged, like he was truly home, and like he had a future again. Spring arrived in the valley in a great rush of melting snow and fresh green grass, with the sound of the creek running strong and wild. Ethan and Lydia rebuilt their barn using lumber paid for with the money they received from Dawson's frozen accounts. They brought their cattle home and carefully bought a few more from honest ranchers to grow their herd. The legal battle against Dawson took many months, but once the federal government stepped in, the result was certain. The crooked surveyor was fired and had to face his own legal troubles. Dawson was found guilty of stealing water rights and using threats. He was fined a large amount of money and was forbidden from buying land in the territory for 10 years. His business empire did not fall apart. Dawson's name was mostly mud now, but Ethan and Lydia paid it no mind. They were too busy building a life that was theirs, from the ground up. Their valley, once a lonely place, started to feel like a real community. Old Man Henderson and his wife came by often, along with other folks happy to see Dawson get his due. One warm June evening, they sat on the porch watching the last light paint the mountains. The cattle were quiet, the new barn stood strong, and the creek kept humming its old tune. Lydia finally asked the question that hung in the air. "You ever regret it? Giving up 10 years of savings for all this trouble?" Ethan thought on it. He remembered the bone-deep loneliness of bunkhouses and working to build another man's dream. He remembered the fire, the fight for water, and the constant fear. Then he looked at Lydia, her hand in his, her face calm in the fading light. He saw everything they had built, a real partnership that started as just a piece of paper. "Not for a single second," he said. "Best deal I ever made." She gave a little laugh and leaned on his shoulder. "You married me. You did not buy me." "True enough. But the land came with you." He kissed her hair. "And you were the best part of the whole bargain." They sat quiet for a bit, watching the first stars pop out in the dark sky. A coyote called out, and another answered from far off. Ethan had come here looking for a piece of ground to call his own, something to stop his wandering. He found it, but he also found something he was not even looking for. He found a woman who would stand with him, shoulder to shoulder when things got tough. He found a home that was more than just dirt and wood. It was the one place he truly belonged. It turned out the best things in life did not come from a careful plan, but from taking a chance on a dying man's last-ditch offer. This valley was theirs now, lock, stock, and barrel. They had won it not with money or muscle, but with pure grit and by sticking together. Silas Grant had asked for a high price, a marriage, a partnership, a promise. But in paying it, Ethan got back everything that truly mattered. Not just a piece of land, but a home. Not just a wife, but a true partner. He had a future worth fighting for. As the night settled in, Ethan pulled Lydia close. He knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, he was right where he was supposed to be. This place was home, and the woman beside him was its heart. What started as a clause in a contract had turned into a real marriage built on respect, hard times, and free choice. This feeling, this was belonging. This was home, earned through fire and fear because they refused to break. He came to Wyoming to buy a future, but found a life worth living instead. The land had demanded a wife, but in return it had given him everything. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.